Very, very warm. Let me give you a very, very warm welcome. My name is Hector and I chair the group called Shared Futures. Shared Futures is an interesting partnership between the local authority, the number of faith groups, a number of charities, and ourselves. Its history is interesting. We got together as a partnership to welcome the families that came to Aberdeen from Syria and to work along with them. And then we encountered another organization called City of Sanctuary. And Shared Futures comes from the Scottish Refugee Council's annual event or annual week that is called Different Past and Shared Futures. And so we're on a kind of a journey to make the city of Aberdeen a city of sanctuary. Now, what that means is a place of welcome, a place of safety, a place of security, a place of signposting for people, particularly for vulnerable people, for needy people, and people particularly that may have a colourful or interesting background, like somebody who's been a refugee or an asylum seeker, somebody who's maybe been trafficked to this city. And there are many hidden communities within this city that we seek to support and care for. So this is really part of our journey to becoming a city of sanctuary. I want to welcome Gun Organ from the City of Sanctuary itself, who's been very helpful in explaining the objectives of City of Sanctuary and the criteria. And we're just about there, but we like the word or the term or the title Shared Futures. And this is about the third or fourth event we've put on. And some of these have been really interesting and very, very successful. So I want to welcome you, and I want to especially welcome our 6 speakers. We're very grateful to them for giving up their time, their expertise, and their talents to share with us what we've called this evening to be the human cost of Brexit. I don't know what your political background is, but it must be fairly challenging and maybe sometimes quite painful to be in the UK if you're from somewhere in Europe during Brexit. And it may be fairly painful anyway to be in the UK at this time, but I want to assure you of our welcome, of our concern, of our compassion for you, and hope that you'll find this afternoon profitable. We have a number of objectives for the afternoon. One is just basically to develop an understanding of the current and likely future impact of Brexit upon EU nationals who are in Aberdeen and in the Northeast. And particularly, and this is an angle in the City of Sanctuary or the Shared Futures group that we share, on the most vulnerable people. So that's one of our objectives, really to develop understanding about what's happening now and what's likely to happen in the future. And then secondly, we want to use what we learn from our speakers and their collective knowledge to identify any gaps or anything that's missing in the provision and the planning that goes on to ensure people feel secure and continue to feel welcome in Scotland and in the UK. And with that, these 2 objectives, what we want to do is to collate a briefing paper that can be shared with relevant local and regional partners. For example, the local authorities in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. This is the voice of EU nationals. This is how they're feeling. This is what they want. This is their desire. This is what would make them feel more secure, more welcome, and more assured of their commitment to the future. And I'm delighted that we're sharing today with another organization. We're not an independent group. We're fairly into partnerships, as you can discern. And the group that we're sharing with today is called No Recourse Northeast, No Recourse to Public Funds, and delighted to share that with the partnership that exists in the Northeast to promote no recourse. So I'm going to welcome Vicky Maroney, who'll explain a little bit more about that. And just before I do so, can we just ensure everybody remains mute until you're in a breakout room, and there's going to be lots of opportunities to chat and to share information, to share ideas. There's the opportunity to write notes and to share messages and so on. But at the moment, if we can remain mute, not mute, I don't know where that word came from. And welcome Vicky Maroney to tell us a little bit more about the day and what she's doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Hector. Hi, everyone. I'm Vicky Maroney. I work for Shelter Scotland, and I'm one of the joint facilitators of the No Recourse North East Partnership. So I'm just going to give a brief background on the No Recourse North East Partnership. The partnership is made up of third and public sector organisations and was formed in 2014. The partnership aim is to ensure those individuals from ethnic minority communities affected by or threatened with homelessness, domestic abuse, or destitution receive appropriate and good quality advice and support. So as a group, we share case studies and good practice. We assist by joint working on challenging and complex cases, and we've also provided informal training on the subject of no recourse to public funds and European nationals' rights and entitlements. So I'll touch on how you can get involved with the No Recourse North East Partnership if you're interested a little bit later. But for now, let's get on with the event. We have some fantastic speakers today. And after our speakers, we're going to be going into breakout rooms for discussions around the human cost of Brexit. Then we'll be coming back into the bigger group and to chat about the next steps. And if all goes to plan, we'll be finished by 6. So I will pass you on to Molly, who's going to introduce our speakers for today.
Thank you very much, Vicky, and hello to everyone. It's lovely to see so many of you here. So I'm Molly, I work for GREC, which is an organisation, a charity that's involved with both the Shared Futures and the No Recourse North East Partnership. And I'm going to be just introducing the speakers and emceeing things, keeping them moving because there's a lot of people here, a lot of speakers. Part of my job at GREC is working for the casework team, which supports people with protected characteristics facing inequality or discrimination. So we have, experienced or observed quite a lot of issues, obviously, relating to Brexit as part of the casework team, as I'm sure no one will be surprised to learn. So the fantastic speakers that we have got coming along to share their insights on these issues tonight are Noelia Martinez, first of all, who is the coordinator of the Citizens' Rights Project, followed by Yinka Lewis, who is a solicitor and a lecturer in law at Robert Gordon University. Then we've got Susanna Jatilova, who is a community development worker at Aberdeen City Council and the chair of Sunnybank Community Centre. Following Susie, we have Diana Hernando, who is the current president of the Erasmus Student Network's Aberdeen chapter. And then we've got Christina Carletti, who's the project officer and caseworker for the International Office of Migration's UK office. And finally, the last speaker who will be joining us is Tatora Mukushi, who is a solicitor currently working with Shelter Scotland on their new migrant destitution project. So I'm sure you'll all agree that is a stacked lineup, and we can't wait to hear what everyone's got to say. So I mentioned that I am a caseworker at GREC and that we've observed quite a lot of issues around Brexit, but one of the things that has been persistent is just been a bit of a feeling of anxiety among communities, which has arisen as a result of the uncertainty which has surrounded Brexit at every turn. So the lack of clear guidance and lack of clearly defined information on the ways Brexit's going to impact on people's lives has clearly been a palpable source of concern for people, unsurprisingly. I mean, hopefully we can go a little bit of the way to mitigating some of that tonight, though. The first speaker that we have is a representative of an organisation that has been doing a lot of very hard work to cut through that uncertainty. The Citizens' Rights Project, who do lots of events and provide support in other ways to EU migrants in the UK and champion the rights of EU citizens in the UK. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Noelia, who will be our first speaker.
Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen to the organizers for inviting us and for putting this very needed conversation together. We're very happy to be here. I'll put my chronometer too to make sure I don't go right. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
So yeah, I'm Noelia Martinez. As Molly said, I'm the project coordinator of the Citizens' Rights Project. And just to sum up what we do, we provide information, advice, and support to EU, EEA, and Swiss citizens and their family members about their rights before and after Brexit, with a very, very special focus on the EU settlement scheme. Now, when I was asked to put this presentation together on the human impact of Brexit, I was trying to find a few words that could describe in a nutshell what I think is the human impact of the EU settlement scheme. And believe it or not, and I've done a lot of work on this, I find that a bit difficult to put it in a few words. And then so when I was researching a bit online, I found and I came across several articles about the findings of the latest survey that was run by the Northumbria University and the 3 million on the experience and impact of the EU settlement scheme. And this is how Professor Tanja Bultmann described it. She talks about erosion of well-being, erosion of self-belonging, and erosion of trust. And I just took her words because I think there is no better way to describe what that impact has been. And I can say quite confidently that I can put many of the clients that we have come across since we started the project in at least one of those boxes. Now, the human impact of the EU settlement scheme, which, as I say, we can sum up in those 3 boxes, is of course very much related to Brexit itself, and that feeling that many of us, I include myself, got when we learned about the outcome of the referendum and we suddenly witnessed that the place that we call home became somehow hostile towards us. But if on top of that, then you realize that to be able to stay, you need to prove to them that you are kind of worth it of your stay, that feelings become worse. Now, I usually, when I talk about the EU settlement scheme, I always like to clarify something at this point, which I think we cannot forget that this hostility towards migrants already existed previous to Brexit and the EU settlement scheme, and that many others were already going through more exhausting and expensive procedures to be able to stay and work in the UK. But sadly, this has become more noticeable because now people from the EU will have to go through a similar process. Anyway, what I am trying to say here is that there is also a human impact attached to the challenges faced by many citizens that need to apply to the EU settlement scheme. And the list that you can see on the slide, as many of you would know already, is not an exhaustive list of the barriers that people might face to apply or when applying to the EU settlement scheme. There are countless barriers, and these are just some examples of this. So, but also to give you a bit of context on the numbers of people we are dealing with, the Home Office estimates that 10 to 20% of people who have to apply to the EU settlement scheme are vulnerable. We know now that is nearly 5 million people, and 10-20% of that is a lot of people. And I think as well we need to take into account the context. We are talking here about a scheme that have a deadline. We have about 2 years to make sure everyone registers, and then we do not have official numbers of the amount of people that needs to register. Now, The problem, I think, is that overall there has been a lack of adapted information to the different audience that need to know about the new migration system. And this includes people that needs to apply, but also caseworkers, organizations supporting vulnerable people, employers and representatives. And also there is not been a continuous flow through the past years of information about the scheme from the Home Office. There's not been a continuous flow, which has resulted in lack of awareness among many groups. It's something that we have witnessed whenever we meet people or do events. And on top of that, the digitalization of the process presents a challenge and a worry for many, many people. Now, it's precisely as well that digitalization that we are realizing that, we're coming to realize that the problems do not end once a person applies for pre-settled or settled status, because we are getting in our project, and I believe other projects that are dealing with the settlement scheme, we're getting many queries from vulnerable citizens with different degrees of vulnerabilities who already have pre-settled and settled status, but they are now struggling to access their EU settlement scheme. And that implies that they will also struggle to update or prove their digital status. And we are getting as well queries from clients that are being discriminated against because employers, bank, landlords either don't know the rules or they take advantage of the situation of uncertainty that the whole situation has created. And these are people with mental health issues, no access to the internet, just the list of vulnerabilities that I put in the previous slides, language barriers or who are not digitally savvy. And the problem is that this can result in citizens not being able to access benefits, jobs, or even a place to live. And there has been reports warning of this inconvenience of a digital-only status because, and I quote, and this is a quote from my report, it could lead to difficulty and potentially even discrimination when seeking to access homes, jobs, and services, just like I explained before. This is a quote that was taken from a study called Digital Immigration Status, a monitoring framework. And they also point out that employers and landlords need to take 9 separate steps to check someone's status online, which could lead to them preferring candidates with a British passport or physical residence permit. And we already have examples of this among our clients. We have had people unable to access benefits because they lost access to their status, people threatened by the DWP with cutting their benefits if they don't apply for their status, clients that were denied universal credits because the DWP was unable to access the status, so they didn't know how to do this. Others that has been denied work because they could not prove their status, even though a passport or an ID should still suffice at this time. And we also have had people worried about their future in the UK and their plans to buy a house, get married, have a family, because of previous convictions and the lack of communications between the police and the Home Office. So you can imagine the stress that can cause. And moreover, the government has also admitted that the EU settlement scheme likely discriminates against women because the automated checks of government databases for evidence of residence do not cover certain welfare payments that women are more likely to receive, such as the child benefit. It discriminates against disabled people because they're likely to find the online process harder to navigate. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it discriminates towards non-EEA citizens because unlike the EU settlement scheme, the process they need to go through to be able to stay or come to the UK is expensive and much more complex. And this is why I have prepared. I will send the presentation to Molly. I'm happy to discuss later on about this. But I have put in this slide all the reports that I have used and some others that you might find interesting. So that's me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Noelia. That was fantastic. A whistle-stop tour of some of the pressures that people are facing at the moment. And I'm glad that you mentioned digital exclusion, because that's another thing that we have really seen as being a very persistent problem in casework. Obviously, it was already an issue, but given the coronavirus situation, that's really crystallized it and made it much, much more pronounced. And it's the most vulnerable people that need to access services the most, that don't have the digital skills to do so or the digital devices to do so. Another thing that we have observed in our casework department is that, and this is perhaps a bit specific to Aberdeen, is that there's a real dearth of affordable immigration advice in the city. There's very, very few or perhaps no solicitors that offer like legal aid for immigration advice. So it's very difficult when people are requiring immigration advice to find it. We can't give it to them. We're not qualified to do that. So and then it's becoming a much bigger problem for EU citizens who previously would have been would have enjoyed a very simple process to come to the UK, and now all of a sudden are finding that they need advice on immigration. Someone who does provide immigration advice affordably in Aberdeen and is probably very overworked as a result of the lack of other services doing so, is Mr. Yinka Lewis, who will be the next speaker joining us. Yinka is the academic director of RGE Law Clinic. So they provide, it's a student-led service that Yinka oversees that provides advice on different areas of law to people in need. Yinka is also a specialist in immigration and nationality law, so we're really glad to have him here today. And I will just hand over to you, Yinka, when you're ready.
Thanks for that, Molly. Hello, everyone. Just as Molly said, my name is Yinka Lewis. I'm the academic director of a law clinic at Robert Gordon University. I'm also a law lecturer as well, teaching a range of modules in addition to immigration law. I'm just going to have a very quick look at the recent changes to the immigration rules that have an impact on EU nationals. Now, it's important to understand that the changes brought in December do not apply to EU nationals who have been present in the UK as of the 31st of December. However, it does apply to EU nationals who are coming into the country or who have been in the country from the 1st of January 2021. There's a long list of changes stated or provided for in Part 9 of the immigration rules, which basically talks about grounds for refusal. And the rules use two different languages. So there's a part of it, that the parts of the changes that make reference to the term must, and there's section of the changes that make reference to the term may. And it's important to understand the distinction between the two. Some of those changes relate to, so for instance, one of the first changes is the grounds for refusal on non-conducive grounds. And these cover issues such as the applicant's conduct, their character, associations with certain organizations, or just a blanket sort of reason stated in the rules as other reasons. This covers a wide range of issues. And for this particular ground of refusal, the application must be refused if an applicant makes an application. That's an applicant who's coming into the country from 1st of January 2021. You've also got the criminality grounds as well, in which case, in such instances, an application must be refused as well. What's very important, what's very interesting about these changes is it doesn't just refuse applications made by applicants, it also cancels the visas those applicants currently hold. So if an applicant, for instance, who currently has pre-settled status, well, not pre-settled status, well, who's applying for leave within a permissible category of the rules, if that person's got a current visa and that person falls within any of the categories listed in Part 9 of the immigration rules, the person's future application will not just be refused. What would happen is the person's current visa will be cancelled as well. Yes, that sounds a bit draconian, and that, to me, in my opinion, is an offshoot of the hostile environment policy introduced in 2014, 2015, and it's very interesting. Another reason where visas may be refused is if the applicant is involved in what's known as a sham marriage. We've had instances where people get married for the purposes of having residence in the country. Now that's been incorporated in, I mean, it's always been there, but now it's made very, very obvious as part of Part 9 of the rules. Another reason for a refusal for a refusal to be made to an application is where a person makes what's known as false representations. So an applicant may be refused if the Home Office or if a caseworker suspects that false representations have been made. This is just lying about an application or providing fake documents in support of an application. Now, it then also states in that same part 9 of the rules that the application must be refused where the caseworker can prove that the person has employed the use of deception in such an application. The language is interesting, and it does make it confusing for someone who's not an authority, someone who's got little or not a lot of knowledge in immigration law. Then, of course, there are grounds to refuse applications based on previous breach of the immigration rules. If you fail to provide required information as requested by the Home Office, an application may be refused. For instance, if the Home Office invites an applicant for an interview and you fail to turn up, or you're given a certain number of days to provide documents in support of your application, and you fail to provide those documents, then the application may be refused. You've also got rough sleepers as well, and they may have their applications refused, or they may have their current visas cancelled. So if someone's found sleeping rough in the country, that's a ground for refusal of an immigration application. The other categories, which I will talk about briefly, are those who cease to meet the requirements of the immigration rules. So if an EU national who's applied from the 1st of January has a condition on the visa, which gives them no recourse to public funds or no working as a spots person in a certain area of law, area of work, for instance, and they breach those conditions, then their visas may be cancelled or any future applications they make may be refused. You've got the issue of sponsorship now, where a lot of EU nationals will now be subjected to, particularly those coming in from the 1st of January and onwards, where for them to be able to take on employment, they have to work with a company that is on what's known as a register of sponsors. Now, where that company ceases to be a sponsor, then such an applicant's visa may be cancelled. That's current visa, and future applications as well may be refused. This applies to students, it applies to skilled workers, it applies to a very long list of category of people applying for visas. And of course, if an endorsing body, for instance, those who sponsor the innovation visa categories, if they cease to have endorsement, then people holding such visas within that category will have the visas refused as well. Now, in relation to the human impact of Brexit, one key thing I thought would have an impact and does have an impact on not just EU nationals pre-December 31st, 2020 or post December 21st, 2020, it applies and it does affect all EU nationals, in my opinion, is the financial impact. Nobody sees this yet, or not a lot of people have noticed it, but it will get to a point where persons who have spent 5 years on pre-settled status visas and those who have spent more than 5 years on the pre-settled status visas would want to apply for citizenship because they've got a right when they qualify for it. What the financial impact of that is the huge financial cost for applying for citizenship. It's not just it's over £1,000 to make an application at the moment, but you're looking at the English language requirements, you're looking at the cost involved in the application for taking the knowledge of life in the UK test in order to meet Appendix KOLL of the immigration rules. So the financial impacts are a lot in relation to that. I'm just looking at time now, and it's exactly 8 minutes. So I will stop now and just take questions later during the breakout session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yinka. That was great. Always great to hear you speak. And yeah, there's obviously so many legal implications that are going to be so difficult for people going forward. So our next speaker is someone who is very connected with communities in the Northeast and in Aberdeen City through her work at Sunnybank Community Centre. And I just realised that my video is not on, my apologies. Through the work at Sunnybank Community Centre, but also through her work at Aberdeen City Council, and that's Susanna Yatalova. So I'm going to invite Susie to come and speak now.
Yeah. Hi, Molly. Can you see me?
Yeah, there we go. That should be
Right,
spotlighted.
here we go, everyone. As much as I wish just to sit around the table with everyone and have a discussion about this current issue, you know, it's a great opportunity, and thank you so much for being able to have a discussion on the matter of Brexit. I mean, I'm just sucking all the information which was said before because I'm not expert in Brexit. I work more with the local community, and myself, I'm come from Czech Republic, so I'm sort of gonna tell you a bit of the story from individual part, and how that reflect on my professional life. So I live in Aberdeen from about 2005, and I felt quite isolated. I came here and I thought that country of many opportunities, but as a single mom based in one of the most deprivation area, I felt very lonely. So I reached out for a bit of the help, and I met with few people up in Sunnybank, and this is how I end up volunteering for Sunnybank. And from 2011, I've been chairing the center. Sunnybank been very multicultural. We've been very lucky because it's very close to Aberdeen University. So we did support a lot of people from different cultural background. And, a beauty of it is to see how people becoming confident, in their journey in different countries. And this was very important, getting this inequality, making them, tackle those inequalities, and making these people learning language, getting confident, finding the jobs. So it was great experiences in Sunnybank, and we created committee of 11 people now. Many of them are from different countries, but I like to go back to Brexit, when in 2016, when election happened, that was a bit cut off for many, during the night. I personally felt like, would I like to stay in the country which actually doesn't want me? I know it doesn't reflect all votings, but this is what the message was sent immediately within our communities. And it was quite difficult. That sense of belonging, which people work very hard abroad, was taken away during the night. That insecurity, that not knowing what's going to happen within the few years, it was just really, really unsettling. I noticed within the community as well that people stop using their languages outside, just not to be targeted as those migrants who were basically targeted during the Brexit campaign and etc. So it had a massive effect on the community in terms of sense of belonging and being welcome. And I mean, it's pretty shame that, we should support people to keep their cultures at home and, get those languages, because integration is not only on the migrants, but we should all understand that, all society should integrate. It's not only on us. At this moment within the community, cost of Brexit is very difficult to see because it's fully override by pandemic. So that's obviously comes with a lot of other issues, as finance, not able to go see families. Some people can't travel at home, and it's just putting the people under the pressure, under the mental financial hardship. So when I was talking with the communities, what is really difficult, what they find the Brexit, it was not enough meaningful support, as Molly mentioned as well, and many of us obviously know. All support was basically run from top to bottom. We never stripped down, never had any community representative who could provide, information to community. I've been working with many associations like Lithuanians, Latvians, and they would benefit from knowledge, so they could pass it on to their members and support within the community. So that lack of support was definitely there. Also, at this moment, I'm dealing with a lot of people who are struggling because they have no passports. So that was also mentioned, and the passports are not easy to get. Embassies are closed, or the waiting times are really long. So that's putting a lot of barriers as well, how to apply for EU settlement scheme. So it's a lot of issue at this moment. But what I'm looking at for the future is, you know, at this moment, the EU citizens becoming almost with a choice of having the EU citizenship, but be also in the UK. How this gonna cause another inequality, another trouble within the society? This is what I'm gonna be looking at. And, you know, when obviously pandemic and everything will open up, when people will travel again, how this gonna affect our society. So that's basically from me, and I would love to have a discussion with everyone, because it's quite a lot of questions at this moment for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susie, for giving us a little insight on to what you've observed personally, but also in your work with communities in Aberdeen. And I was glad that you mentioned the kind of general increase in animosity that people have been facing since Brexit, because we do know that there's been a rise in hate crime and the likes, and it's not pleasant to talk about, but it is happening.
No,
so,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And it shouldn't be. Yeah. But we've seen it through casework as well. More and more people in neighbourhoods are facing, if not out and out hate crime, then just general animosity because they're an EU migrant, and it's a very, very unpleasant effect, because Aberdeen is a hugely diverse city, as I'm sure all of you know, one of the most diverse cities in Scotland, or the most diverse city in Scotland rather. And the reason for that, one of the many reasons for that, aside from oil and the rest of the industry, is the fact that we've got 2 universities that attract a huge international student population to the city. And a lot of those students are European, and a lot of those European students are having a bit of a tough time of things at the moment, as I'm sure you can imagine. So our next speaker is a representative, current president of Aberdeen University's Erasmus Student Network. And I'm really excited to have Diana Hernando here with us today to speak to us and give us a bit of an insight into how things are for the students at the moment.
Hello, hi everyone. As Molly has said, my name is Diana and I'm an international student here in Aberdeen. So thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm really happy to be here today. And well, I'll be mainly focusing on the impacts of Brexit on the student community. And to kick things off, I would like to talk about my own experience pre-Brexit, when I first came to Scotland as an international student. I must admit, I was really scared. I was, of course, like leaving my home. It was one of the first time I was going abroad, leaving my comfort zone. And I think the local and international community here in Aberdeen made everything really easy, and I felt really welcomed. I am now really grateful after 4 years living here in Aberdeen for all the experiences I've been having and living throughout these times. I think Scotland is now like my second home, and well, one of the most rewarding experiences as well was the chance I had to complete an Erasmus program. I went to Istanbul for 3 months to study and live there, and I continued this international experience. I once again met like people from different backgrounds and cultures, and I think this expanded my mind and my frontiers as well. So when I was in Istanbul, I started getting involved with the Erasmus Student Network. And for those of you who doesn't know what's ESN, or the Erasmus Student Network, we are an international organization run by students. And our main aim is to promote international mobility within students. Mainly, we try to help local students with taking this important step of going abroad, and international students to adjust to their new cities and their new environment. So when I came back to Aberdeen, I continued getting involved with ESN in Aberdeen University. And this year I've become the president of ESN. I think we have had a double challenge this year. We have faced Brexit and the pandemic, so it's been really difficult to continue with our activities, as you can imagine. And well, as you can see, my general experience here in Aberdeen has been incredibly positive, and I think that this is broadly shared by amongst the international community. And for the purpose of this talk, I've been speaking with several students, both UK and international students in Aberdeen, and I've gathered information regarding their feelings towards Brexit. I think the most recurring theme has been the uncertainty felt amongst the student community. Even myself, that I've been trying to research these past couple of days about what Brexit means for students, there's a lack of information, and yeah, I think even I am confused. So I think on a personal level, students have felt a lot of stress about their future. And as Noelia has previously mentioned, the process is needed to remain in the UK that a lot of European students, and yeah, especially European students, have needed to complete. The pre-settlement scheme has been really difficult, and it has meant a really daunting experience for a lot of students. Also, students have raised concerns about their future academic and professional prospects. For international students, I think there are a lot of doubts about whether they should remain in the UK or they should leave and go to Europe, whether there will be more opportunities for them here or in the EU. And of course, if they remain in the UK, whether they will not find their appropriate opportunities. And in the case of UK students, I think the main concern is that they feel their possibilities are narrowing, and especially for going abroad. So, for instance, some of the UK students I've talked to, they've said that some jobs now require applicants to hold an EU passport. So they feel this keeps changing every day, and of course, this adds up to their uncertainty. And then I think the complexity of this whole situation has been also felt and reflected on the whole bureaucracy that students need to go through now, the restrictions of movement, visa applications, even the possibility of families to come and visit them has been raised by students. And finally, I think the changes in fees and funding for both UK and international students have been one of the most remarkable impacts of Brexit. For instance, a Scottish political science student in Aberdeen has told me how he had always wanted to study a master's in Belgium or the Netherlands, and with the changes in fees and funding for British students, he can't afford it now. He's now even considering not doing a master's at all. He has also remarked how overall Brexit has definitely dimmed his hopes for working and living abroad. And I think all in all, these 3 points can be summarized as a feeling of not being welcomed. And I would like to contrast this with my experience when I first came to Scotland, as I've previously talked about. And yeah, as an ESN colleague of mine stated, students are now realizing how privileged we were before Brexit, where we didn't even have to think about any of these issues. And I know hearing about these experiences can be really disheartening. And to finish my presentation, I would like to finish on a more positive note, I think. So speaking about how ESN will approach these whole coming years regarding Brexit and our activities, the Erasmus program will disappear in 2023. However, the Turing scheme will replace this program, and the Erasmus Mundus, with opportunities all around the globe, will continue. So some opportunities for going abroad with funding by the British Council, I think, will continue. And we will take a more regional approach. We will try to promote the UK as an attractive destination for international students. We will look for new partners in Aberdeen and the UK to continue with our activities. And we will also promote trips and activities across the region. I think there's a lot of passion within ESN to continue with our work and continue promoting international mobility within education. And this has also been seen not only in Aberdeen, but in ESN UK as a whole, in a more national level. And also the good news is that the Erasmus Student Network as an organization will also be expanding its borders beyond Europe, so that countries that are not included in the Erasmus student program will also be able to join this network and promote mobility and help students. So the UK will not be the only country that belong to the ESN, that belong to the network, sorry, but don't continue in the Erasmus program. And I think that's all in my part. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope these personal experiences I've talked about have brought some light to this complex and broad topic of how Brexit will impact our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diana. That was great to have a little bit of just a little bit of a positive spin on things, because you're right. Although these conversations are necessary, they can be tiring, especially when you have to have them so often for the last 4 years. So our next speaker is someone who's going to be all too familiar with the issues surrounding migration, particularly because of her work with their EUSS project. She's a representative for the International Office of Migration, International Organization of Migration, and I'm really excited to have Christina here with us today. I can't see, you're still there? Oh, there you are, there you are. So yeah, we'll welcome next Christina from IOM UK to take this virtual stage.
Thank you very much, Molly. I was invited to kind of provide a bit of an outline of the work that we've been doing in the past year and a half to support vulnerable EU nationals in local authority network and in third sector networks. So I work for the International Organization for Migration, and I'm an immigration advisor. Our team is composed of 3 caseworkers working in Scotland. At the moment, we have a specific one dedicated to looked after children. You might be familiar with this, but the Home Office had provided some funding to provide support to vulnerable EU nationals. And we work under the funding, but also under Scottish Government funding. And we work in partnership with COSLA, with a convention of Scottish local authorities. And the reason why we work in partnership with them is because we definitely realized that we don't want people to fall through the cracks of the immigration system, and we want vulnerable people to receive as much support as needed for them to be able to legalize their immigration status post grace period, now post Brexit. So the way we've been working is directly with local authority teams, especially social workers, welfare rights officer, housing officer, and so on. And we've been providing the support directly to them. So we're not public facing, but we've been referred, and we have quite a bit, especially lately, referred cases for vulnerable people, and we don't have a specific group we're supporting a bit of, for example, Roma community, homeless people, looked after children and care leavers, people with disabilities, victims of human trafficking, and so on, to get their immigration status. And for sure, we've been seeing the barriers that applicants are facing. One of those, especially now because of COVID and travel restriction, for sure, is the fact that many don't have up-to-date passports or ID, which is definitely a process that takes some time to get new ones. Sometimes it's even impossible to do. This is one of definitely the main barriers. As, for example, Noelia was saying at the beginning, what we've been seeing so much recently is the difficulty in accessing the proof of the status, or many don't really know what they applied for example, because they haven't received qualified immigration advice, and so they don't know really what they applied for. They don't know what this means for them, what rights they have, what they need to keep their status up to date. and so on. So we've been, before COVID, I used to go to do, for example, joint visits. So I used to go to with social workers to people's houses and try to support as much as possible, because for sure IT is another problem. Many don't have phones, or if they have phones, they don't have phones that support the application, and so now we're doing everything over the phone, which for sure has presented some barriers, but we've still been quite successful. And what we are concerned about for sure is the tight deadline. So the deadline is coming up soon, and we want to help as many people as possible to apply before the deadline, because we're not yet sure about what it will be applying late, so post grace period, and what that would mean for clients. So yes, that's a bit about us, and I'm happy to answer any question if there is any, or to go in details about how we can help.
Thank you so much, Christina, for telling us about your project. That's fantastic. And something Christina's just mentioned, and that really, I think pretty much all of our speakers have touched on tonight, is the financial implications for community members, for people that are living here and calling the UK home, and have been doing so quite successfully for maybe a while, but it's about to get a lot harder. And the increased levels of destitution that we've seen have been huge across the board. And the next person that's going to speak to us tonight is our final speaker, and he knows about migrant destitution very well, because he's the new lead of the Shelter Scotland's Migrant Destitution Project. So I'm very pleased to welcome our final speaker for the evening, Tatora Mukushi, to the stage. I keep saying to the stage, it's not a stage, but you know.
Thank God.
Hi, Tatora, please, over to you.
Hi, Molly, thanks very much. Thank you for all my previous speakers for covering a lot of the background. I'm going to try and race through this so you're not stuck past my 8 minutes. I'm going to try and share my screen if I can. There we go. Oh, brilliant. Right, one of these should be able to. In case there's any doubts, I don't do a lot of PowerPoint. Anyway,
if you go to where it says slideshow at the top, I'm in the top bar.
Oh, there we go.
Click on that, then
yeah, that does it.
Go.
Brilliant.
I love my
Thank you.
presentation.
Oh,
You're welcome.
Thank God, I hate presentations. So as you can see, if there was ever any doubt. Right. So this is the Migrant Destitution Project. Shelter was set up, started in September last year, and obviously we had it in our sights, the Brexit situation and what it was going to do to Scotland in particular. So I'm going to race through these slides. As you can see, there's a lot of them. I'm not going to cover everything that's on them, but you should have the slides available later. And if I give you some of the context, it will give you an idea of what's in them, and you'll know whether you want to look at them again. So first of all, that's just background, the legislation that's involved in Brexit and what it's doing to migrants. First of all, the impact on the legislation itself, as you can see, all and none. Legislation itself relating to housing in Scotland hasn't changed. The facts on the ground have changed. So how local authorities comply with that legislation, how they use it to assess eligibility is what's going to be impacted. People subject to immigration control have always been excluded from housing and homelessness provision, but that was specific exclusions are given, and that obviously didn't apply to EU nationals because they had an exemption. What the EU settlement scheme has done and what Brexit has done has changed that, and it's for local authorities to get to grips with that. And as anybody knows who's worked with local authorities, there are always issues in making sure that's done well, if at all. Moving on. So Again, I'm not going to go through this entirely, but you can see there the key housing provisions, the key provisions in the Housing Act, and what the local authorities have to do. So in terms of making inquiries and assessing eligibility, they have to satisfy themselves that someone is homeless and that they're eligible. And this issue of settled status, pre-settled status, etc., is what's going to be the decider of that. It's very difficult to understand for experts in the law. It's going to be even more difficult to understand for people who are not experts in the law. Who is eligible? And this is, there's been a lot of myths around who is. Some people have said it's only folk who have settled status who are eligible. That's not the case. There are 4 categories that we consider of EU nationals. First of all, people with settled status. Secondly, people with pre-settled status who were exercising treaty rights in the UK before the 1st of January, when we actually left the EU. And thirdly, people who haven't made an application to the EU settlement scheme, but were exercising treaty rights and are eligible for homelessness through the variety of eligibility factors on the date of presentation. And the only people who are not eligible for homelessness assistance are people who arrive on or after the 1st of January, unless the family members are EA nationals, in which case they have different routes. So as you can see, that's 3 out of 4 categories that are eligible, and that allows for quite a lot of people. This one I will leave. It explains what the legislation is, and you may understand it once I come back in the context of what I say later. So pre-settled status, the understanding, pre-settled status is there to allow EU nationals to stay, to maintain their treaty rights until such time as they can be settled and no longer be subject to immigration control. So with pre-settled status, you are still unfortunately subject to immigration control, but you do so in a EU context, which is the context created by the EU treaties. They don't fall into the exemptions that automatically exempt people from housing control, but because of that context, they are treated specially, and their rights are preserved by a couple of other pieces of legislation. As you look back to slide 2, item 5 and 6 preserve the EU treaty rights. So category 3, people with an outstanding application to the EU settlement scheme. Again, these are people who are here on the 31st of December and exercising treaty rights throughout, and they continue to exercise treaty rights. So these people who, until the end of the grace period, until the 30th of June, can still make an application, or either have made an application waiting for a result, or can still make an application to the EU settlement scheme, which is very important for, I think, for the work that everybody in this virtual room is doing. And then there's category 4, which is everybody else, people who are ineligible until they have a grant of settled status. So for example, if you aren't exercising treaty rights, you don't have pre-settled status, you could enter the UK after the 1st of January and claim settled status, but you still wouldn't be eligible for homelessness or homeless assistance until that settled status has come through. New arrivals to the UK will have a no recourse to public funds condition. So they come to the UK, they'll get a visa like everybody else, which will allow them to any public assistance. And there is to be considered whether or not people are eligible for assistance under any other statutory framework. If you're interested in that, I'm happy to discuss it afterwards in the breakout session, because that involves things beyond the EU settlement scheme. There's some information here about the code of guidance that exists and how they exist. And the issue of guidance, I think, is a lack of guidance particularly, but what we have in the guidance already is a good indication of how the local authority is to be faced when seeking homeless assistance or housing. Same again with this one. In terms of where we are now, we only have until the 30th of June, that is the end of the grace period. The Home Office has said there'll be no extension to the grace period, despite COVID and despite the impact it's had on people. We've heard from countless speakers already today, particular groups that have been affected: disabled people, women, people with language barriers, and just people who have been disadvantaged by COVID, whether work or otherwise. Applications for housing or homelessness must be made when people are eligible, otherwise the opportunity is lost. And once that deadline of 30th of June comes in, there's nothing to be gained. And if you haven't got your application for homelessness and satisfied that you meet the criteria, then you don't get it back again. There is a positive in Scotland that once the local authority have assessed you as being eligible, they can't revise that decision. But bear in mind that with COVID, there are delays to assessment. Local authority has delays like everybody else, and that could impact your possibility of being deemed eligible before the cutoff date. In relation to the NRPF, the no recourse to public funds, the Scottish Government has an anti-destitution strategy. And this strategy, unfortunately, is undermined by Brexit. They have a 3 pillars approach, the first of which is prevent. So preventing destitution is surely the best way to not have to deal with destitution. And that's undermined by the deadlines. There's a lot of work to be done in a very short amount of time. And it's once the deadlines are missed, as I said, there's no coming back. Partnerships and coordination are needed greatly. And that's part of the strategy, but these require a lot of input, particularly from local authorities, to work together with agencies and make things happen. Resources also need to be diverted to what I call the EU emergency. Again, it's a short amount of time, and once that time limit is reached, there's no coming back. There's a need for obviously highly skilled advisors and engagement officers. We've already spoken. I think it was Jenko who was saying that he seems to be the one-man band in the Northeast, basically giving advice and that sort of thing. That sort of skill, that sort of input is greatly needed. Again, the RPF strategy, it's designed and defined within a devolved context, and this is problematic with engagement because obviously EU nationals, we've always thought of them as part of our community, part of the nation, and there's never been an issue with that. Now by law, they are dealt with as people subject to immigration control, and the NRPF strategy pushes them to one side and say we only deal with devolved issues, which is really problematic because if you leave out the people who are who are likely to become destitute because they're immigrants, you're going to have a serious destitution problem in your hands that you created by not addressing when you could have done it at the right time. There's a problem because the large numbers of people involved, the problem because these people have relations with other Scottish nationals and their destitution jeopardizes those other people. There's also the interplay with other rights, such as family rights, people's ability to interact with families, extended families, that sort of thing. So when EU nationals' situation is determined as right to access benefits, ignoring them is dangerous and frankly quite daft. Again, trying desperately to end on a positive note, there are some protections in place. 3 out of the 4 categories I described before they are eligible for homeless assistance and housing. The same categories are also exempt from some of the immigration rules, such as rough sleeping. So something has been crafted out for them, albeit not everything. Focused action like this event and other engagements have raised awareness, and they also engage skilled people like solicitors to provide services remotely. I know Shelter, myself and colleagues have been trying to engage other solicitors to do legal aid services over the phone, over video conferencing, that sort of thing, particularly in areas like the Northeast, where there's a bit of a desert. And lastly, it's not over yet. We still do have some time, so we should use it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatora. That was great. And again, I really just appreciate that both yourself and Diana have opted to end on a positive note because, gosh, we need them at times like these, don't we? So that, believe it or not, brings us to the end of the first part of our programme for today. Tatora was our final speaker, so I'd like to just quickly say thank you so much to all 6 of the people who joined the panel. There's been great feedback in the chat. I don't know if anyone's been able to catch up with it. There's one quick question here, which I might ask in a minute, but I just will let you all know that we're about to go into breakout rooms. So we're going to break into smaller groups. My colleague Dave is doing that just now. And then we will discuss a few questions and you can share your thoughts that have come up as a result of the talks or thoughts that you think maybe we haven't missed out of something that hasn't been mentioned. So there will be a facilitator and in each group to kind of talk us through it and lead the conversation and somebody taking notes. But those groups won't be recorded. So although we'll be taking notes, it will be anonymised, and there won't be recordings of those groups. I don't think you can actually record breakout groups, even if you did want to. So I will ask the two main questions that we're wanting to ask you all are, first of all, what strategy, plans and activities are you aware of to mitigate the human costs of Brexit that we've spoken about? And then secondly, based on those, what gaps are there? And I mean, already we've identified some gaps tonight. So what gaps are there in existing provision, strategy, etc.? And who should be filling them and how can we fill them? And also, what should we be prioritising in the briefing paper that we're going to prepare as a result of this event? Because as Hector said at the beginning, one of the objectives of today's event is to prepare a short briefing paper, policy briefing paper to distribute to local authorities, national authorities and partners to advise them of the human costs of Brexit and how to mitigate those. So obviously people will be taking notes in the room, but we've also got a Padlet, which is like a notice board where you can stick any thoughts up that you've maybe not had time to share, or perhaps you don't want to share them out loud. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Adriana, who's our local Padlet expert, and she's going to tell you all a little bit about that.
Hello, everyone. Right, so I'll just be very brief. I'm going to share my screen for just a minute to show you what the Padlet looks like. And what I'll do is I will be sharing the link and you should be able to access the Padlet. What you should be seeing in screen, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes, all right. So what you will see is 3 columns with a plus sign underneath. And basically that's because under the question, you will be able to write down views. However, please keep in mind that we have a person that is going to be taking notes and a person that will be a moderator. And that means that, you know, it is nice to share opinions verbally rather than just writing. But if there's something else that perhaps you want to add and you didn't have the time to do it, this is the place where you can do it. At the end of these 3 columns, there is something else, which is a survey. And Molly, I don't know if you want to add something about this just now.
Yes, so the survey is, I'm going to give you an opportunity to provide feedback about the session today, and also just a further place to for us to collect some data for the policy paper. So there's some questions about the EU settlement scheme and other related things in there, and also there's some feedback questions about how everyone found the format and the content of today's event,
Okay.
and possibilities to join us for follow-up events as well.
That's right. As soon as you move your mouse over that survey, you will see that you can click on it and it will take you to a new link that will have the survey on it. Okay. Are there any questions? Is everyone clear how it works? Yeah. It's quite straightforward, but if you need some help, obviously you can ask for help within the room as well. I will just share the link now for you, and you should be able to have it in the chat. And once you click on the link, you will have that screen with you as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Adriana. So the Padlet is in the chat now, so you should easily be able to access it. And I guess now Dave can start putting people into the rooms.
Okay, fingers crossed this goes well. See you in there.
Are we all back, Dave?
Should be.
Well, can I thank everybody so much for this evening's exercise. I thought it was tremendous in lots and lots of ways. I thought the speakers were fantastic, and I'm delighted that they're championing the needs of people with their advocacy and with what they're doing, working on behalf of EU nationals. There was obviously a fair bit of pain discussed with some of our friends from Europe, and I loved what Noelia said at the beginning, erosion of different aspects of belonging, that sense of I did belong, but now I'm a stranger in my own land, I'm an alien. That sense of trust, that sense of identity, all of that thing, these qualities that make for good citizenship being eroded, and erosion of well-being, you know, these characteristics are so negative, and yet we have created a situation. And I think this event has been marvelous in highlighting both sides of it, the pain side of it, and yet the champions of advocacy and working alongside people who have issues. We came across 2 or 3 barriers in our discussion, the barrier of the digital world in which we live for many people, the barrier of language, which is another barrier, which I think is worth mentioning. And these barriers, I think, can be overcome by the people that we heard speak and the organizations who are doing what they can to represent European nationals. So just again, thank you. We'll be in touch with the evaluation of the event and with our plans about the briefing paper and opportunities to be involved with Shared Futures. And if you would like to be added to our mailing list, you could send Dave a message on the chat or send him an email to ensure that in future you'll become part of the Shared Futures initiative. I won't describe it again. I made an attempt at the beginning, but I welcomed people to try to describe it. It's like trying to put an octopus in a string bag. If you think of that image for a minute, it's quite a challenge, but Shared Futures is a bit like that. We want to be helpful, supportive, and really professional in everything that we do on behalf of those that are needy in the city, particularly the vulnerable. So I'm going to hand over to Vicky, who will touch on some of the supports that are available and how to get involved, and then thank the speakers. So that's all from me, but thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. I by accident pressed enter. I've got my email address, our holding page, and our Twitter account. I was going to share it after I finished this bit, but I pressed enter by mistake beforehand. So I just wanted to say, for anyone who wanted to get involved in the No Recourse Northeast Partnership, our next meeting is Tuesday the 2nd of March, and that's at 10 AM. So our group normally meets on a quarterly basis, but due to COVID-19, these meetings have been a lot more regular recently, as we're trying to keep on top of the changes from Brexit to the things with the pandemic. So if you want to be on the mailing list, I've shared my email address. The mailing list, we share things like changes in legislation, sorry, my tongue's getting tied, resources, relevant events that are coming up. So give me an email. I've shared as well our holding page on the ACFO website, and that has some of our resources there. And we also have a Twitter page, so give us a follow. And I guess all that's left to say is thank you to all our fabulous speakers today. A big thank you to the facilitators and note takers, along with everyone else who's played a part in making today possible. Another big thanks to Goon at the City of Sanctuary, who let us use their Zoom account this afternoon. And lastly, a big thank you to you all, our attendees. We really hope you enjoyed today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event. We appreciate your support, so stay safe and take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Cheers.
Bye, folks.
Bye now.
Bye.
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 Bye.